Good afternoon. That was decent, but I think we can do better. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is a pleasure to be here with you today. Now, we have a slight problem. I have far too much energy to stand behind a podium. So we're going to ad-lib, and we're going to get a microphone, and we're going to walk around. Okay? All right, so it is wonderful to be here with you today. I have so much respect for the work that Michelle and I do on a daily basis. It is challenging to be in the higher education space because this is a space that is radically changing. And it's radically changing in what I think is the most authentic and best way, from the ground up. When I became a college president 12 years ago, all anyone wanted to talk about was the elite schools, right? And looked for leadership and change from the elite schools. And I remember pointing out to people back then that in the history of mankind, revolutions never started from above, right? What do the people who rule have to revolt against, right? We don't have enough spoils? Like, that's not how it works. Revolutions start from below. They start from small, disaffected groups of people who look around and say, I've had it. I have had it. I want something different. And then they start to create something different. So during the time that we are together now, and I'm going to come over here because I don't want you all to feel like you have no friends, okay? And first of all, let me just say to all my scaling partner friends, it is wonderful to see you guys. You know, this is a wonderful, those of you who don't know, we're part of a Gates group. We meet 2, 3, 15 times a year, is it? We meet a lot. We're discussing how you scale changes in higher education. What we've really done is made great friends, all right? So it's wonderful to see you guys. But my point is, in this era, change comes similarly to the way it's come throughout history, which is small groups of people who are unhappy make noise, and then they make a movement, and then things change for all of us. That's how it works. So today, for the time that we're together, we're going to talk about change. Or the way that we frame it at Paul Quinn College, we call it a revolution. Because when we started, we had no friends. Right? No, this is a true story. We had no friends. In fact, the friends we had jettisoned us, right? We were kicked out of all the organizations that we were a part of. People tried to take away our accreditation. I mean, it was bad. My first 2 years of being a college president, we lost 80% of our enrollment. Okay, which, by the way, not the way you want to start your career. Okay, not at all. So for the time we're together today, I want to talk about Paul Quinn College, but I really want to talk about us, right? And us is the higher education community and what we are capable of and what this country needs us to be capable of. So ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to the revolution. This is my favorite quote. And one day we must ask the question, why are there 40 million poor people in America? By Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Now, lots of people love the I Have a Dream version of Dr. King. I actually love the Poor People's Campaign version of Dr. King. Because that was Dr. King who looked around and said, I thought I fought the right war, but I fought a battle in a war that was much bigger than what I saw, and then changed to fight the real fight, which is addressing poverty. 40 million Americans live in poverty in the richest country in the world. The only reason that exists is because we allow it to exist. And if we want to change it, then all of us have to dedicate ourselves to changing it. And that's what we talk about every day at Paul Quinn College. We believe America is at war against its future. This is a real picture. This is a real picture of how some people in our country live. I could tell you that it's partially a real picture of the way some of my students live. And I know that because I've been to their homes. right? I'm not one of those college presidents that sits in my office and writes papers and goes to conferences, although I do go to this conference. Um, but it's summertime. My students aren't here right now, all right? But my point is, I know the lives my students lead because I've helped recruit them. I've been to their high schools. I've walked the streets of their neighborhood because I don't know how you're supposed to lead people that you don't know, right? I mean, is it the theory of leadership? I mean, I went back and got a doctorate as a sitting college president, in part because I realized that I was president of a college where the only thing I shared in common with my students was that the majority of them were black, right? I grew up in a very upper middle class, affluent life. I got 3 degrees in 10 years. I worked because that's what you needed to do to build your resume. But I was charged with taking care of students who come from Pell Grant backgrounds, who come from some of the most difficult places in this country. And I had a theory of what their lives were like, but I didn't understand what it meant to work full-time, go to school full-time, have a family. That is hard, right? And we were asking the wrong questions. The question we should have been asking is, why do we force people to go to school that way? Why do we think that's okay? But I would not have known that until, frankly, I was stressed out all the time. I felt as if I was doing a horrible job being a college president. I felt as if I was doing a horrible job being a husband. I felt like I was doing a horrible job being a parent, which is kind of ironic when I won Father of the Year, because I thought I was sucking it up as a dad, right? So the point is, you have to be able to walk in people's shoes, but first you have to know their shoes, right? This is too much of our reality in this country. So our students are poor. Do you know that the majority of students in public K through 12 education in this country live in low-income backgrounds and families? If you look at the map, the entire southern portion of our country, students are living in deep poverty and going to school. This means that those students are on free and reduced lunch plans, right? It means that if they aren't in school, they might not eat a balanced meal. How can we be okay with that? Right? How can we look at this map and feel anything other than anger that we've allowed this to be our reality? So our students are poor. Our students are unprepared. Only 46% of SAT takers in 2017 met the benchmark score for college readiness. Only 31% of Latino test takers met that mark. Only 20% of African American test takers met that mark. So our students are poor, they're unprepared for college, and our graduates apparently don't get any better after they complete college. So 79% of all employers want their entry-level hires to come to them with real-world work experience for entry-level jobs. Where are you supposed to get experience for entry-level jobs if you're entering the jobs when you come from college? Well, it turns out college students wish that colleges had helped them get real-world work experience. 50% of college students want that. So let's think about this for a moment. Your customer as a institution of higher education happens to be employers. And it also happens to be your students. I know some people get offended by the idea of calling the relationship a customer relationship. The students pay us. They're our customers, right? Our employer partners are unhappy. Our students are unhappy. The only people happy with this arrangement happens to be higher ed. This is a bad business model. This is why people are so angry at us. They have told us what they want, and we have not listened. You all act like this is okay, right? If my wife told me what she wanted and I continually didn't listen, okay, are you all married? Like, do you, right? This is a hard crowd. Let me just help you out for a little bit. You will not be married if that's your business model, okay? All right. So, colleges are too expensive. 70% of college graduates have significant debt. 44 million Americans have debt that totals $1.5 trillion. The average student loan debt in 2018 was $37,000. We have to be able to do better than that. It's hard to believe that we as a country aren't at war against our future when these are our numbers. So here's the thing, the cavalry isn't coming. Well, this made a lot more sense before this weekend when Robert Smith just decided to play Daddy Warbucks, right? But the point with this is this, billionaires, and this is just 2017, billionaires made so much money that they could have ended extreme poverty 7 times over. And yet extreme poverty still exists. Now, we're not talking about they had to give all their money away. All they had to do was just give 2017's earnings away, and extreme poverty would have been ended. And yet, poverty still exists. So we go back to the Dr. Martin Luther King quote. At some point, we have to ask ourselves, why are there 40 million people living in poverty when we could fix it? But if the people who have the financial resources choose not to address this issue, then maybe it's incumbent upon the rest of us to do so. So, welcome to Paul Quinn College and the Quinnite Nation. This is Jasmine Norman. She is an amazing student at our college. She was number 2 in her high school class in Memphis, Frederick Douglass High School. And about every other year, we invite a group in from Dear World, and they do this exercise where you write down messages on your body that you want people to know about you. She wants everyone to know that she's a rose that grew from concrete. Now, you all missed the whole marriage thing, so I'm guessing this is not a Tupac crowd either, right? So for those of you who don't know Tupac, he was a rhythmic American poet, okay? He wrote poetry that sometimes vacillated between rage and just jamming party tunes, okay? But he wrote this amazing book of poetry that talked about roses that grow from concrete. At Paul Quinn College, we exist, schools like ours exist, because we understand that roses do grow from concrete. They just shouldn't have to, right? They just shouldn't have to. We also understand this about roses. Every rose does not bloom on the first day of spring, but it doesn't mean that that rose won't be brilliant. Jasmine Norman is a brilliant rose who grew from concrete. And what she's telling you is she's owning her story. She's telling it to you herself. So one of the things that we believe at Paul Quinn College is we think that institutions of higher education should turn themselves outward and address the needs of the day. At Paul Quinn College, 85% of our students annually are on Pell Grants. 70% of those students have 0 expected family contributions. 40% of our students come from outside the state of Texas. 23% of our students are Latino. And people are always surprised about how many Latino students we have. 2 things about that. 1, we are in Texas. Right? And for those of you who might have gone to high school in Texas where they don't teach real American history, you will catch that later, okay? All right? Texas was Mexico, okay? So the only way we wind up without a significant number of Latino students if we just tell Latino students you can't come to school here. And we would never do that. I used to tell this joke that HBCU stood for Hispanic, Black, and Caucasian University. Told the joke to a group of people who didn't appreciate it. The only reason I got out alive is because I was bigger and faster than they were, all right? But my point is, we are institutions that have always welcomed everyone, all right? The only way you could have schools back at the end of slavery was you had to depend on other communities because we weren't allowed to read, write, own property, gain wealth. So who was going to help establish our schools? Who was going to teach? We have always been models of diversity. That doesn't change. So we're proud of who we are. But when your students are poor, when they come from disaffected communities, then you fight the fights that those students need you to fight. right? And that's what we have done. That's what we think higher ed should do. So here's the thing. When your students come from poverty, you can fight the edges of poverty, right? Which is what we started out doing. We turned our football field into a farm because we were in a food desert. And we thought students should have access, communities should have access to food. And, you know, by the way, people always get really fired up about that. And they're like, oh, it was so brave of you to cut football. We lost every game, right? Like, our football team wasn't on national TV. We weren't producing any NBA, any NFL draft picks. In fact, the really horrible part about this is our largest customer are the Dallas Cowboys. So the reality of it is we have put more kale in the NFL than we ever put players, all right? And that says something. But we fought that fight. We also then turned around and had to deal with the environmental justice issue. Because in case you don't know this, when you are in under-resourced communities, that's where people put all the bad stuff. So 2 miles from our community that the college resides in is the city garbage dump. Okay? The city garbage dump. We were closer to the garbage dump than we were a grocery store. That's not your experience at Harvard. It's not your experience at Yale. It's not your experience at George Washington. I've been to Georgetown a lot. Not your experience at Georgetown. In fact, I can't figure out where the garbage dump is in D.C., okay? So my point is, you fight the fights that the people that you represent need fought. And increasingly, the fight that needs to be fought in America today is poverty. And you can play around the edges of poverty, or you can strike at its heart. And I've heard lots of people tell me, oh, you shouldn't talk about trying to end poverty. You can't end poverty. You're going to look silly. You're going to look stupid. Listen, here's to the crazy ones. Right? Here's the people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world. Because if you don't think you can, you never will. And we believe that the model we've created will give us a chance at doing that. And more importantly, if we fail, so what? At least we tried. And that's more important. So here's our solution. We believe in something called reality-based education. Here's the first step of it. Urban work colleges. So we created our own model of higher education. We looked around and thought, if 79% of employers want students to come with real-world work experience, if 50% of students want real-world work experience, why don't we create a model that accomplishes that, right? So for us, if you come to Paul Quinn College and you live on campus, you work. You get a job. And here's something else you should know. Everybody's working anyway. Over 75% of today's college students work more than 24 hours per week. But they're working in jobs that don't help establish them in their careers. And they're working job hours which put them at academic peril. I'm always fascinated when I go places and I hear faculty talk about, oh, the students are lazy. They're not working hard enough. The students are tired, right? Because they're working all the time. Like, and you have to understand that. So maybe instead of criticizing them, you develop systems that allow them to have it a little bit easier so they can do the work. That's what this does. We have taken the need for students to go out and find their own jobs in-house. We find the jobs for our students, right? Every student works somewhere between 10 and 16 hours per week, right? Because of that, and they work on campus and they work off campus. And because of that, we were able to cut tuition and fees by $10,000. Okay, so it costs, next year it'll cost less than $16,000 to go to Paul Quinn College, right? And you will come and you will get a job. And we've created the option for students to be able to graduate with about $10,000 of debt. Now, let me be very clear. Many of our students are borrowing more than that, okay? Because it's the first time they've had access to what passes as capital markets. Because if you're coming from a Pell Grant background, that means you're coming from a low-income community, most likely. If you're coming from a low-income community, your banking industry are payday lending places, okay? Like, it's a different life. So one of the things that we realize is that by reducing tuition and fees, you also reduce the amount of money students can borrow because there's a cap on that, all right? So we're either going to help you not borrow as much through counseling you, or we're going to put a cap on it so you don't look up and you're $50,000 in debt when you graduate because you've never had access to money and your family needed the money. All right? So we're very pleased at that. And here's what that's done. In 4 years' time, we've reduced the average debt from $39,000 down to $16,000. All right? Now, we're not happy with 16. We're trying to drive it down to 10 or less. But when you start at 39, that's a significant accomplishment. Part of the reason it was so high is because our students were taking longer to graduate because they had to work, and that extended the amount of time that they were in school. These are just solving real-world issues, all right? Here's the other thing. Strata and Gallup did a study that talked about how important it is to have internships. So with our system, students have internships for every year that they're there. So you will graduate. If you're there for 2 years, you have 2 years of internship experience. 4 years, you have 4 years of internship experience. So this is our model. Now, we were fascinated by the fact that people went around talking about the liberal arts. And if you listen to folks talk about the liberal arts, you would think the liberal arts are now the worst thing known to mankind. And that's just not true. But here's something to think about. If you had not been, let's call it freshened up, since ancient Greece and Rome, might you need some updating? Right? I mean, because essentially that's what's happened with the liberal arts. The system's been in existence since God knows when, and no one bothered to update it. So since you all work at places that didn't update it, we beat you to it. And since we beat you to it, we named it after ourselves. So it's no longer the liberal arts, it's the Quinnite arts. All right? And so we went out and we asked our friends in business. We said, what do students need to know to thrive in your environment? They said, well, the first thing is they need to be able to write. Fair enough. We said, what's the second thing? They said, secondly, they need to be able to speak persuasively. Fair enough. Third thing was they need to be able to work in teams and solve real-world issues, so they need to be able to think critically. So we said, well, if you really scratch below the surface, writing is the liberal arts concept of grammar. Speaking is the liberal arts concept of rhetoric, and critical thinking is the liberal arts concept of reasoning. So why don't we just require every single course at Paul Quinn to have students work on those skills, which is how we created writing across the curriculum, speaking across the curriculum, reasoning across the curriculum, and then building digital mastery across the curriculum, because that one wasn't around back then, right? So this is freshening up what's available. So here's what it looks like at Paul Quinn now. Starting next fall, we've already beta tested all of these except the last one, but I'm going to come to that. Starting next fall, every single semester at Paul Quinn, there is a writing course. Now, you're going to write papers in all your classes, but you don't become a great writer solely through repetition. You become a great writer by having the opportunity to have your work critiqued. So to do that, that means the faculty has to work in a cohesive fashion so that the students, every class isn't assigning an ungodly amount of work that then can't be properly processed and evaluated. So now you will take every semester a writing course. And the class, literally it's going to be called Writing Seminar. And the papers that you write during the semester will be evaluated in that course. So our goal is to produce the best writers in America, right? Because you need repetition and you need coaching to achieve that. So we're thrilled about that. Every class now requires you to get up and make public presentations because there is an art to learning how to communicate with people. The more that you stand in front of a room, the more comfortable you become, the more successful you become at it. And we're thrilled about that. Then critical thinking across the curriculum, reasoning across the curriculum, our students all work in teams to solve real-world problems. Now, this is what comes next after that is our honors college, where there will be no majors. All you're going to do for 4 years is solve real-world problems. That's it. We're going to partner with cities, and they're going to send us assignments that are real-world problems, and our students are going to have to solve them. And so when they graduate, they will have a list of skills that they've acquired through the work program, but they will also have a list of accomplishments from the problems that they've helped solve. And they're going to have to learn what happens when you screw up. Because you know what? You're going to screw up. That's just part of life. What you have to learn is what happens next. But it is a very clarifying moment when you realize that your mess-ups have an impact on people's lives. That might get the best out of them. So we're excited about that. I'm actually beta testing that concept in the class I'm teaching this summer. And then the last piece of this, building digital mastery. We're really excited about this because here's what that's going to look like. Every year, students will have the opportunity to pick up 1 to 2 digital certificates, right, or credentials that they can then stack and use to make themselves more marketable. So let me draw the big picture of what this looks like. You come to Paul Quinn College for less than $16,000 a year, for less than $64,000 that you're going to pay for a college education. You're going to graduate with 3 different forms of education. You're going to have your subject matter mastery, which is what you've chosen to major in. You're going to have 4 years of real-world work experience, which you will have gained from your job assignments through the work program. Then you're going to have somewhere between 4 to 8 digital credentials or certificates that you can stack, that you can use to access employment in the technical, somewhere in technology, right? So what we have done is we have poverty-proofed education because we have driven down the student loan amount to something that is reasonable. We've given you 3 forms of educational mastery that you can use to access different careers. Because let's be honest, you major in something, because half of us majored in stuff, and we got midway through college and we were like, ugh, I don't want to do, right? And then you sat down with your college counselor, and your college counselor said, well, you said, this is what I really want to do. And they said, it will take you another 4 years to graduate from that. And then you said, I love what I'm doing right now. Okay? That's how it works. All right? So why don't we quit acting like we don't know that? So let's let you hedge your bet a little bit. Then you go out, you've worked in the work program, and you've worked in jobs that you thought were in the areas that you wanted a career in. But the more you got into it, the more you realized, maybe this isn't what I thought it was. So you change your mind. Well, in a typical situation, you'd be out of luck. But by having 4 to 8 digital credentials or stackable credentials, you now have the ability to market yourself in a completely different fashion. And here's why this is also important. Many students drop out after their first year of college, and they're left worse off. They borrow money for that first year, they're confused, they're disillusioned, and parents, families, public policymakers, everybody's questioning whether or not college was worth it for that student. You know what you learn your first year in college at Paul Quinn now? You get a credential in Microsoft Office, right? You become Microsoft Office certified. Do you know you can make $70,000 a year being Microsoft Office certified? Do you know after 1 year of college, we have ended poverty in your family if you have a Microsoft Office credential? So whether you stay with us or not, we have materially improved your life in 1 year of college. Okay? That's important, right? That's important. And I had a really funny individual, and by funny, I mean poor lost soul, right? Who said to me, well, if they can make $70,000 after 1 year of college, why would they come back? And I was just like, because if we can teach you to make $70,000 after 1 year of college, think what we can do after 4. And then he was just like, I hate you. No, he literally was like, I hate you. All right. But my point with all this is introducing reality into education. We factored in the reality of their lives. We game plan for the choices that real people make in real world situations. And we didn't ask ourselves, well, everybody else has always done it that way, so we have to do it that way too. We looked at our students and said, you deserve something different. You deserve something better. This is what we came up with. So here's some other things that you should know about reality-based education. We offer a summer bridge program. This is our 10th summer of doing that. The students come immediately after their high school graduations, and they take 9 hours of courses, right? They get 9 credit hours before they even start college. They don't pay a dime as long as they qualify for the Pell Grant, because it turns out that you can access the prior year's Pell if you start before the end of the fiscal year, right? So we start in June, access that year's Pell Grant that the students didn't use because they were in high school, okay? And they take those courses. Here's something else you should know about the classes. They're taught by myself and the Vice President of Academic Affairs. So we are sending a message from the very beginning that we see you. We see you, we hear you, and we want you to develop a relationship with us, not based on, oh, I'm the president and you can't talk to me. I want you to see me in class every day. So my students come to class 6 weeks, and with the exception of this summer, I am there all 6 weeks. This summer I've got to go to South Africa, so I love them, but I'm gonna go to South Africa for a week, right? So they'll have me for 5 weeks, okay? But 2 hours a day, 4 days a week, I am there with them, in front of them. And we start out every class with a simple challenge. Tell me what's on your mind, right? How are you today? And that is so important, because sometimes what the students need to do is talk to you, right? Talk to you about their lives, talk to you about what upset them, talk about what scared them. Several years ago, when the brother was shot by the police in Minneapolis, St. Paul, we had a group of students from Minneapolis, St. Paul who knew him, right? So can you imagine lecturing that day when they're sitting there in pain? No, you have to give a platform for people to express themselves. Summer Bridge is the single best thing that we do at this college, right? Our data has shown the single greatest predictor of whether or not someone is successful at Paul Quinn is whether or not they attended Summer Bridge, all right? Second thing, we've created a mental health culture. So our students come from the inner cities of this country, which means that they have dealt with violence. They have dealt with trauma of poverty, right? And if you have grown up in poverty, it changes you, it affects you, right? In all the most negative, hurtful, and damaging ways. But there's no real effective mental health programs, by and large, in inner cities, because those things are all the privilege of the privileged. Because they're the ones who get to spend their lives moving in and out of difficult situations easily. They're the ones who have been told, it's okay, it's just an episode. Whereas the children of the poor have been told, well, that's just your uncle. You know, he's not quite right, and we're just going to leave him over there. He didn't have to be left over there. There just wasn't anyone who reached out and got him what he needed. So we do this differently. When you come to Paul Quinn College, you come to Summer Bridge, and Summer Bridge is mandatory, you get a mental health assessment. Everyone gets a mental health assessment, because we are leveling the playing field, okay? And then we do town hall meetings. And we have town hall meetings twice a year about mental health. And I chair the first one. And I talk to the students about my struggle that I had with mental health. Because one of the things that they don't know is, 10 years ago, I had a sudden cardiac death episode. And I died and had to be resuscitated, right? I had a 2% chance of living. And I lived. Now, I don't know about y'all, but if that becomes your reality, that might be a little heavy for you, okay? You are a hard crowd, right? Like, you all are so well adjusted, okay? So well adjusted. My point is, you have to be honest with people, right? You have to talk about your struggle. Let them know the times that you needed someone to help pull you through. And my wife was like, hey, I think you need to go talk to someone. Because I would get up in the morning and go to work. I would come home. I would put on my with password pajamas, and I would get in bed, and I was just trying not to die. Right? That's just being the most honest I can be with you. Okay? And my wife was sort of like, right? Which is, you have to have people in your life you trust. Right? You have to have people in your life that you trust. And so we went to counseling. You know, I sat there, and the doctor was like, listen, here's the good news. You're going to be fine. He said, because you came in to talk about this stuff and get some help. So this moment doesn't have to become your lifetime. So I tell my students that story. And then, you know, it turns into, literally everybody starts crying because then they start talking about their stories, and their stories are way more traumatic than my story. But they realize they're in a safe place for the first time to have those conversations. So we have them, right? So we partnered with the University of Texas Southwestern. They came in, their residents did all the mental health treatment of our students for free. Now we've gotten grants where we have that program and 2 full-time counselors on campus. And this is who we are, right? We don't want anyone to feel as if they have to be in the shadows. We created an Office of Prestigious Opportunities. Do you know what that is? That's career development. Right? That's career development, because no one tells students that their jobs are prestigious opportunities. They haven't been dealt with that way. So we were like, look, why don't we just hook them up? Tell them it is inevitable that you're going to lead a life of prestigious opportunities. And we're going to use this as a gateway to show you how. All right? Then we revised the academic calendar. We no longer have classes after Thanksgiving. So the semester ends at Thanksgiving, because you know what? You know how expensive it is to go home for Thanksgiving and come back? You know how depressing it is not to have the money to go home for Thanksgiving? And to try and pretend like it's okay to go eat at your friend's house because, you know, they can cook and they love you, right? No, why don't we just tell people, you're good, let's go home. So we start semester a little early. Starting this fall, we now have a travel abroad requirement. For you to graduate from Paul Quinn, you have to travel abroad, right? And we've created different pathways to be able to do that. My favorite is that we now include traveling to reservations as traveling abroad, because those are sovereign nations. So if you're a student that it's a little difficult for you to imagine yourself flying overseas, we'll just fly you to Oklahoma. All right? So this is the evidence of our success. 74% of our alumni are employed at graduation. Okay, 100% of the students who participate in the work program are employed at graduation. Our retention rate is 71%. And let me be very clear. I want 90%. I think if you send me your child, we should graduate you. But when I started, I inherited a retention rate that was 33%. So I'm going to celebrate our 71%. Thank you. Thank you. From the moment we dropped down to 151 students, we've had a 250% increase in enrollment. All right, and it would be more than that, except we ran out of housing. We ran out of housing. So we're in the process right now of building our first new building on campus in 40 years. All right, so we're excited about that. Here's our other evidence of our success. We've opened up a second campus. Not only are we in Dallas, but we have PQC Plano, which is fantastic. So we have a group of students who live out there, and we are experimenting with a new campusless campus model. So students get really cool apartments to live in. They go to work. They take their classes in a hybrid model, but we have no physical structures that are permanent. All right, which then we can pass that savings along to the students. It works out beautifully, and by the way, they love it. Here's some other evidence. These are our friends, right? These are our friends. These are people who participate in the work program, who give us money. You will notice these are some of the names you like to have as your friends, right? So we have cool friends too, all right? This is our next. We are scaling. We're in the process right now of working with Boston Consulting Group to create a replication model. Our goal is to create a global network of schools just like this, okay? So we're going to have campusless campus models. We're going to have foundational business partners. our students are going to work, and then they're going to grow up, be rich and famous, give lots of money back to Paul Quinn College. Okay, God, you all, you know what? I'm done, all right? I'm done. It was wonderful being here with you today. I pray that somewhere along the line you will reflect upon our time together and realize it was amazing. If you do not, I still love you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you.
That was amazing. That was amazing. We are so